Hello and welcome to episode 67 of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and today's guest, wait, I almost forgot to introduce the co-host. What is your name?
My name is Denise Tryon.
That was perfect. You were breaking up on my end, so I didn't even hear your answer, which is great. So, yeah, that was great. So what did you say?
My name is Zachariah Cheddar.
Yeah. I wish I hadn't asked. I should have done never look a gift horse in the mouth. So, Lance LeDuc, how are you?
I feel like a gift horse.
Yeah. I once ate raw horse in Japan. So
I did too.
Yeah. There you go.
Horse tartare. So, remember, one of our colleagues was mortified. It's the same colleague who was mortified that we were. It was Greece. Should we save that for another day?
We probably should save it for another day. That was
teased the story, which is not nice.
No, we should tell it. We should tell it. We got an email that complimented us on not laughing at inside jokes as much as we used to. So,
good point.
So let's tell the story.
We were at
and also this is all leading perfectly to me thanking Parker Mouthpieces, since he just posted. Michael Parker is one of my dearest friends in the world, and he just posted on Facebook that he's been vegan for 15 years, like 2 days ago. And
wow.
We're about to tell a story about people clubbing fish over the head and eating raw horse. So I'm going to make sure to tell him to listen to this episode.
We were in Greece, and we went to a trout farm, and they fed us trout. And one of the members of the organization posed with the skeletal remains of his lunch. And then also in the same 15-minute span, got on a high horse about the cruelty that was going on to cause these poor little fishies to become our lunch. So it was just a beautiful piece of food pyramid irony.
We were in the mountains of Greece somewhere. I don't even know where. So that was one. That was one heck of no, but we drove like over an hour outside of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we were in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah, actually, let's just go right into thanking our vegan friend, Parker Mouthpieces, for providing our hosting. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba Mouthpiece and the Lance LeDuc Model Euphonium Mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com, or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
The mouthpieces are vegan, so he's covered.
The mouthpieces are definitely vegan. So, let's go ahead and get the Duquesne out of the way. Before we forget.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk about our incredible guest,
Duquesne University School of Music, the Mary Papert School of Music, and thank them for their wonderful support of this podcast. You can find out about the great programs and ensembles and staff and faculty of the Mary Papert School of Music by clicking on the link in the show notes, and a special thanks to Jim Nova for helping make that possible. Jim Nova, you remember Jim Nova, don't you?
It's not ringing a bell.
He does those overdubs where he takes his French horn and he plays.
Oh, the ABBA guy.
He does all those ABBA. Well, and he also did, like, there was the David Bowie thing. There was like Starman, and he did.
He thinks he'd blow our mind.
Major Tom, like all these like space related things. He does overdubs with his French horn, and he plays all the parts. It's really, really fascinating. He's and Elton John Rocket Man, I think, is coming out next. I think that's where he's going next.
This has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but we need to link to this in the show notes. Write this down, Lance.
All right, writing.
David Zirkle posted a video on Facebook, which was the AHA song "Take on Me," but it was someone playing the recorder. So it is really, really horrifically bad. But I was crying when I was watching this. I guess there's some guy who gets karaoke tracks and then he plays the recorder over it for the melodies, and It's really awful. It's really, really, really terrible.
All right,
So
I'll find it.
yeah, you need to put that in the show notes because idiots like you and I will, which I suspect is most of our audience, because otherwise, what are they doing? We'll really appreciate that. So. Speaking of not idiots, speaking of shockingly articulate people who are thoughtful and can cover a ridiculous amount of ground in less than an hour interview, our interview is with Denise Tryon, formerly of the Philadelphia Orchestra, formerly of the Detroit Symphony, the Columbus Symphony, the Baltimore Symphony. I was just blown away by her interview. It was incredible.
Really, really, really good.
Really good. We tell everybody that's a guest on the show that they were great, but she was phenomenal. It was really super interesting. And we started this with Joanna a couple of weeks ago, that we are starting to record just a super short bonus episode with each person, which is just for our Patreon patrons. And she shared a few stories that were just like, that had us absolutely howling. Just some absolutely priceless gems. So if you would like to hear those, you can, all of our Patreon patrons get to hear the bonus episode, which we are doing in the alternate weeks. So, and you can access that for as little as $1 per episode, which is just $2 a month. So go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, and you can find out all about that. And thank you so much to everybody who's already doing that. And thank you to everyone who has gone to iTunes. If you are one of those people who has thought, like me, I've done this many times with podcasts, heard the host ask and said, I'm absolutely going to do that, and then you didn't do it, you would be our best friends if you just go and just write a few words and give us like a 7-star review or however many they'll let you give. So, anything else, Lance?
No, I think that covers it.
I think that covers it. This was an awesome conversation with Denise. She's a rock star, and we were very lucky to have her on the podcast, and I think you're going to love it. So without further ado, here is our interview with Denise Tryon of the Peabody Conservatory and formerly of a whole lot of symphony orchestras. And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by one of the best low horn players in the world, Denise Tryon. Denise, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Very well.
You know.
Okay.
Lance isn't impressed with your low playing. Whatever.
Yeah, I have the voice to match.
So Denise teaches full-time at Peabody, and she used to be in like 5 different orchestras, which we could spend a good chunk of this interview just talking about how the hell you won like 5 orchestral auditions.
Sure, we could talk about that.
Yeah, other than just being a badass, which I think is kind of the underlying theme there, but maybe if there's a little bit more insight there. But can you just give us a brief overview of your career arc until you are obviously peaking here by appearing on the Brass Junkies?
I mean, of course, it's all downhill from here.
What got you to this point?
Sure. So I started off by playing in the New World Symphony down in Miami Beach, and that was a great experience for me. I really didn't have a lot of orchestral experience before going there. And after 3 years of that, then I won 4th horn in the Columbus Symphony. I was there for 2 years, and then 3 years in the Baltimore Symphony as 2nd horn. And then on to Detroit, where I played 4th horn for 6 years, and then finally on to Philadelphia, where I was 4th horn for 8 years. That's it.
Wow. And you just left the Philadelphia Orchestra, correct?
I did, that's correct, yeah. In fact, I'm still technically a member, but only for about another week. And I resigned back in January because I was moving into full-time teaching at Peabody and trying to pursue some of the outside ventures that I really enjoy doing, like commissioning and recording new low horn pieces and going around the world giving master classes and recitals and all of that kind of stuff.
Lance, can you imagine someone quitting a full-time gig to pursue other projects? I can't even fathom that.
So let's stay with that for a second. And what was the reaction to your colleagues, either within the orchestra or just other horn players, when you said you were going to leave this gig that many people would, do a lot to get?
Right. It's been mixed reaction. I think that some of my colleagues in the orchestra, they knew that I was doing a lot of outside things, and they knew that I really loved it, and that it was getting to the point where something had to give, because I was just, I didn't have enough time to sleep or eat or do anything. So it became obvious to the people that I was quite close with in the orchestra that something was going to have to change. I hope, I don't know, the majority of people were sad. I don't know, maybe some people are jumping up and down, whatever. But and then I think probably a lot of the horn world is a little confused. Some people have said that they understand.
That has nothing to do with this, right?
Right, that's just horn players.
Right.
We've been to the IHS before, so yeah, we understand.
Wow. Why? I mean, look, I love the IHS, but why are you guys going?
Well, it turns out that if there's a check waiting for us, that Lance will bring his euphonium and I'll bring my tuba basically anywhere. So
nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Throw the cases open. Hope you get a couple of bucks. It's all
Yeah,
good.
whatever works.
Yep. But I think it's been a mixed reaction in the horn world. I think people are sort of confused as to why I've done that, and I think some other people that maybe that know how heavy the schedule is in a top 5, and then if I was basically doing full-time teaching on top of that it really starts to wear on you. So I think there's been a little bit of mixed reaction, which that's okay. It took me a number of years to sort of get to that point where I decided that I would try to step out and leave the orchestra.
So this is really interesting to me. So you mind if we keep talking about this for a second?
That's fine.
So how long between when you suspected that you were probably going to need to do this and when you pulled the trigger? And what was that experience like?
So, yeah, it started probably about maybe 3-ish years ago, something like that. And it was around the time when I started commissioning new pieces for low horn, and I moved into recording. And then I started going around and doing more recitals and wanting to promote that, and I got so interested in it. And that part of my career just started getting heavier and heavier, which I'm extremely thankful for. And I had been teaching at Peabody for 10 years. This is my 11th year there. So I had been actually doing it part of the time from Detroit. So I was flying in every week. And then every week to come down and take my 1.5 or potentially 2 days off from the orchestra and teach full-time at Peabody, do like 8 to 10 hours of teaching 2 days in a row. It just started to like wear on me. The older I got, the more I just was really having a hard time. And so my husband and I started having some conversations about, okay, this is not sustainable, and what do I want to see in my career 10 years from now?
There you go.
Yeah.
And I always knew that at some point I would move into full-time teaching because I love it. I just really love it so much. And I always sort of thought that would be, maybe in my early to middle 50s. So, it happened, roughly a decade earlier than I thought it would. But so we started having that conversation, and it's a lot easier to take a year leave from an orchestra than it is to take a year leave from teaching and leave those kids sort of high and dry without the person that they came to, to study with.
Right.
So we started, we were really quite careful about it and working with a financial planner to make sure that I wasn't making a really huge mistake financially. And so we knew really about 2 years ago that for sure that was going to be most likely my last year in the orchestra, and that I was going to ask for a leave of absence for the following year and then make a decision. And I told the orchestra that I didn't want to come back and sub for a certain amount of time because I needed to really see how it felt to not have sort of a constant orchestral obligation. So somewhere middle to the end of October of 2016, I knew at that point that I was pretty happy doing the full-time teaching and going around and being able to do master classes and recitals and all of that. So I knew pretty early on that I was going to leave the orchestra. And at that point, it'd been 22 years of playing professionally. That's a good, healthy orchestral career. So
Sure.
that's how that happened.
If you had, are there any things you wish you had done differently? I mean, do you wish you'd done it sooner? Do you wish you'd handled it differently? Are there any parts of it? I mean, now that you're there, you've kind of, it happened the way that it did. In retrospect, would you say there have been times when it's a self-serving question because you struggle sometimes. I've quit some fantastic organizations, some of them twice, and
they let you back in.
Can you believe it? Knowing when to do that there's no roadmap, there's no book, there's no guide,
and it's easier to not leave.
It's
easier to not quit.
And in almost every case, I wished I'd done it sooner.
Interesting.
So with that in mind, is there anything you might have done differently, or that you are just sort of thinking of, this is, as soon as you made the decision, it felt great, and why didn't I do this sooner? Or I don't know. What do you want to? You can handle that question any way you want.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
It's okay. We'll edit the last 6 minutes out.
Fantastic.
I'm always the one that asks the super rambling questions. It was really nice for Lance to ask one, so that made me feel.
I have a sort of general philosophy in my life that I try not to regret decisions that I've made. I feel like I try to make informed decisions. So whatever information I have at my hands, those are the decisions I make based off of that information. So I'd been approached, I won't say for what teaching job, but I'd been approached at some point to interview for a full-time teaching job a number of years ago. And I thought about it because it was at an institution that I would have loved to have taught at. And I thought, gosh, I'm just not ready to give up full-time playing yet. So I continued to play, and then it just sort of happened that everything started getting really heavy, and it just became time. So for me, it was the right time. I feel like I did it really well. I mean, I'm really happy with how everything sort of happened. And I had a conversation with Radovan Vlakovic a number of years ago, asking him sort of the same thing. How do you know? He played full-time orchestra for a long time, and then he left to teach and solo and whatever. And how do you know? And he said, you just know. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to run with that information for a while. So it became clear to me when it was time, and I don't regret either staying too long or leaving too early. I mean, I miss a lot of my friends, and it's an incredible orchestra, and I love the city. So there are things that I miss about it. I think that's normal anytime you move from a city or leave a job. But all in all, for me and where I am in my life, it was the right decision, and it came at the right time.
How did you develop the no regrets thing? Has that been just sort of a part of you since you were little, or this is a thing you came to later, or was that a thing you were taught, or where did that come from?
It's definitely something that came around later. Sometimes you look back, especially when you're a little bit younger, hopefully not when you're older, but you look back and you sort of think, boy, I really wish I had done X, Y, and Z. And the example for me is I studied with Frøydis Revekra in Norway when I was in my middle to late 20s, around 27, 28. And I really feel like she helped me get on the road that I'm on now to, really understanding how my face works and how I want to practice and, how to make music, all of those things. And I sort of say to myself, gosh, I wish I had studied with her earlier, sooner. But I don't think I was ready to hear what she had to say until I had gotten to that point, because I was not at a very good point emotionally or mentally about the horn. So for me, she just came at just the right moment. And I looked back a few years after that and I thought, I really wish I'd met her earlier. But then I was like, you know what? I wasn't ready for what she had to say. So that's when I started realizing, I feel like, I don't mean to get all hippy dippy trippy right now, but I feel like people are presented to you at the moment when you're ready to hear what they have to say. Because if I'd, thought back a few years before meeting her, people were telling me some of the same things that she was telling me, but I didn't hear it, didn't believe it. I don't know what the reasoning was. So that's when I sort of developed the no regrets ideology. Whew, speaking tough. Low horn. There you go.
You're on a podcast hosted by two low brass players.
I found my people
here. Yeah.
Your grammar is not going to be the one that sticks out. So
nice.
I really like what you said before, just how you put it, where you talked about how you always make a decision with the information that you have at that time. And boy, seems to be a part of the human condition that it can, that we can all tend to get more information in the future and then superimpose that on a decision that we made or didn't make a day, a week, 10 years ago, and then beat ourselves up over it when that information wasn't knowable. So I think that's only something that comes from trial and error, at least in my own experience, and it can be a hard game to not play.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's really great. So let's talk about how you won 19 professional orchestral auditions, because that's not really that normal. Why? I mean, this is kind of it's a bad question because it's so open-ended, but why do you think you've been able to have that much success with auditions?
I think it's several-fold. One, I am always my mantra is just try to be the best horn player I can be every day and every year and every decade. So for me, I'm always trying to improve upon my playing. And I think that has served me well through all of my years. I also, I really feel like there's a difference in my opinion. There's a difference between how you play in a section and how you play in an audition. And in an audition, regardless of what position you are applying for, holds true in my mind for strings, winds, brass, percussion, whatever. You are a soloist when you're out on that stage. And you have to convince people of your playing. It's like you're a little bit like a car salesman. You have to convince people that this is the model you want to buy. And it can be challenging for people, especially in low horn positions, when you don't hear your sound on a regular basis soaring over the top of the orchestra as a soloist. It can be challenging then to walk into an audition and play with that kind of risk-taking. So I have a little bit of a level, and really only in music. I'm not a risk-taker in life, but except I just left the Philadelphia Orchestra. Okay.
I was just about to
okay,
Have
wait.
you listened to the first 16 minutes of this interview?
I thought I was even talking through it, but who knows? I don't actually listen to myself.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, of course, I lost my train of thought. Risk-taking. There we go. So I think I'm a risk taker musically, and I like things to be. I'm very methodical about how I practice and all of my technique, and I think those two things combined have led to some really good audition skills. Because you can't go out there and be the super soloist and have not great rhythm, or your intonation is crazy and all of this stuff. And you can't go out there and play quote unquote perfect technique and make no music. Neither one of those people is going to win a job. So that's my 2 cents.
There you go.
Well, and the focusing on there's so many directions that we could go in from there. But in terms of someone that you talk about how much you focus on your technique, it reminds me of, and I think that enables you to take risks, right, in an audition and have them pay out. But it's like a baseball pitcher. The best baseball pitchers in the world are the ones who can recreate their pitching delivery exactly over and over and over again
Yeah.
for thousands of pitches in a row, which is obviously a very complex motion. There's so many parts to it, but they can just do it over and over again. And so it sounds like that's kind of something that you strive for on the horn, which then when the spotlight is on and you're in soloist mode, then you're able to recreate all of that stuff on the fly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I've won. Well, if I'm not going to include New World in this particular account, but so I've won 4 jobs, not the 19 that you touted earlier. 4 jobs, and I've taken 35 auditions. So
Wow.
it's not like I took 4 auditions and won 4 jobs. You know, I worked my butt off, taking a lot of auditions, and I took a lot of high horn auditions in the beginning too, because that's what I was when I was down in New World. I played mostly principal horn, and then once I finally won a low horn spot, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I was missing. And then I also felt more comfortable as a human being playing my instrument, and I think that helped. So.
Well, let's jump subjects for a second. You alluded to it. So how did you end up going for the low horn thing, which is where you've kind of made your mark?
Right. So as I mentioned, I played a lot of high horn at New World and made it to the finals of a couple of high horn auditions. And, you know, I think it was never specifically said, but at that time, where I went to school, and I think other schools, it's sort of assumed that you're going to try to become a high horn player. Because those are the people, it's sort of like, there was this unwritten rule that like, oh, well, if you played low horn, it was just because maybe you weren't very good at the horn, or you couldn't win a job as a high horn player, so by default, you went to low horn. And so I took a lot of high horn auditions, and as I said, I did well, but felt quite frustrated. And so then I was reaching the end of my time at New World, because you're only allowed to be there 3 years. And I thought, okay, Tryon, you got to start taking any audition that comes up. So I took Columbus, and that was my first low horn audition, and I won it. And I thought that I lost it in the finals because I crashed and burned on Mahler 1. That was pretty sad, but I won. And after about, I don't know, maybe a month sitting in that job, I realized I really loved that position. And I would say that I love fourth horn a little bit more than I like second horn, although I love playing duets, Beethoven, stuff like that. But for me, playing the bass line, I just love it. And, as a side note, I studied with Chester Schmitz, tuba player in Boston Symphony, for my senior year of college. So that's kind of interesting. Just a little side note there.
One of the all-time greats.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I saw the Boston Symphony perform over 200 times by the time I graduated from high school. So
wow,
I'm
nice.
Intimately familiar with Chester. Wow. So what was that like studying with him?
Well, the lesson lasted however long the pot of coffee that he brought in lasted. And he just already had so much energy anyways. You're like, oh my God, dude, on caffeine, come on. So you're killing me. So they would last, 2.5 hours, something like that. And we just talked a lot about making music, and we didn't really get to talk about technique because I don't think he really wanted to dive into that too much. And I'd studied with Kovalevsky before that, and so we'd gotten into that quite a bit. So it was great, but yeah, it was super high intensity marathon lessons.
Wow.
So at what point along the way did you start becoming a low horn soloist?
It was once I had this dream in my brain, which I don't recommend for anyone, but I got this little harebrained idea that I wanted to be in a top 5. That was a goal for me, which I have a whole thing about. I'm not so into goals these days. But so I was in Detroit, and I was continuing to take auditions in top 5s when they would come open. And I loved playing in Detroit. I love that section. I love that city. But I really wanted to be in a top 5, so I kept going. And I was not getting past that hurdle, getting into the finals and sort of solidifying anything. And I hadn't taken an audition in a little while, and I thought, gosh, what am I doing? I'm playing fourth horn in the orchestra. This is my only sort of musical outlet. I don't play a lot of chamber music. Maybe I should do a recital. And, full admission here, I honestly can say that after my degree recital for my bachelor's, I hoped to God I never had to play another recital ever in my life. That really did not turn out so well. But yeah, I just really didn't enjoy that. So it'd been about 15 years since I'd given a recital, and I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. And why not focus on some pieces that sort of showcase the low register? So I started looking, and I'm like, gosh, there's not very much written. So I picked a few pieces. I played a Bach cello suite and played a couple of other things, and I played a recital, and amazingly got so tense leading up to that recital that in the green room after the recital, I was standing there and talking with just a couple of people that were left at the end, and I made some stupid move. I was like, oh yeah, I was nervous and blah, 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 and I dislocated my knee. Boom. And went down on the ground, and everyone thought I was still just kind of joking around. And I'm like, crying out in pain and hitting my knee over and over again. Anyways,
and they still think it's a joke. See, this exact same thing happened to my aunt at Thanksgiving one year. She was doing a John Belushi impression, threw her knee out, fell to the ground, screaming.
Yes.
We were laughing our faces off, and she's like, "No, I'm serious," and we were like, "Yeah, right." And we're it was we could not. That was over 40 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Luckily, I wasn't holding my horn, and there were only good friends left in there. But so that was about 2 or 3 months, something like that, before there was a Boston audition, the first audition for a second horn that I was in the finals for, and they didn't hire anybody. And then 10 days later was the Philly fourth horn audition, which I won. And for me, I really do think the difference was stepping up and giving that recital and forcing myself to capture everyone's attention for however long it went on, an hour or whatever. So for me, that's sort of, I really enjoyed that. And then once I got into Philly, I thought, okay, well, I'm not really going to be taking auditions after this. So, I think I do need another outlet, because playing fourth horn, while I enjoy it, is not as musically satisfying necessarily as doing some other things. So I was, I'd been pretty disappointed in the fact that I couldn't really find a lot of low horn things written to be able to play for this recital. So I thought, okay, why not? And I sort of hemmed and hawed for a number of years. And then I thought, Denise, the only way this is going to happen is if you actually call someone up and ask them to write you a piece. So that's what I did. And I had 4 new pieces written for me. And there were a couple of pieces that had been written, a number of years ago. And came out with that album August of 2015. I think I have that right. And I am in the process of now commissioning a bunch of new works that I'm hoping to record roughly about a year from now. So that it'll be released, whatever, January of, what would that be, 19?
Oy.
You're talking about the record So Low, yeah?
So Low, yeah.
And we will stick a link to the a place you can buy the record.
Sweet.
It's a record, right?
Well, it's a CD, yes. Grandpa, what the heck? It's a record.
I know. I heard it come out of my mouth, and I thought, well, I might as well start.
Yeah, right.
Are people allowed to buy music anymore? I thought you're supposed to just listen to it for free. Otherwise, you run the risk of encouraging the artist to make another one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. And I have a duo partnership with Carl Pittock, who's the principal horn in Detroit. And we are in the final stages of putting out a duo album. I'm hoping that that'll be out by maybe the middle of October, maybe end of October. So that's pretty exciting.
Well, cool. And that's a nice little segue, because he's your partner in crime for the audition mode seminar, right?
Yes, correct.
So can you explain what that is?
What audition mode is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so between Carl and myself, audition-wise, I think we've taken over 70 auditions.
Wow.
And he's won, I don't know what, 6 and been the runner-up in 4. I don't know. It's some crazy number. And so, and he, of course, he plays principal in Detroit, and I was 4th there. And I had met him one summer. We were both playing the Colorado Music Festival together. And so I know him well, and we got to talking about auditions and how there's no camp or seminar or whatever you want to call it out there that's dealing with how to take an audition, how to be successful in auditions, how to write a resume, how to play in a section, how to negotiate a contract, trial weeks, all of those things. So we started talking about it. We thought, gosh, it would be a great idea to do some sort of a camp. Camp, I don't like that word. I feel like I'm 12 when I say that. I mean, there are many other times I feel like I'm 12 as well, but
you did just call Lance grandpa too.
That's
so
true.
It works.
Record. It's okay. I still, when kids have to make recordings for festivals, I say, "Oh, when do you have to tape that?" Yeah, that's I'm not using tape anymore. So there it is. Yeah. So we created this seminar. There's a better word. And it's typically roughly about 6 days long. We changed the length a little bit, sort of from what we hear feedback-wise from our participants. And we have a high horn list and we have a low horn list, and everybody has to work on both lists, and they have to take both mock auditions at the end, because we really feel like, especially in the beginning of taking auditions, you want to be taking pretty much anything that comes up, unless you're so clearly so much stronger in one register over another. But in every audition, you have to prove that you can do the opposite of whatever that audition is. So, and they play in a section, and we do lots of master classes on all of the excerpts, and what else do we do? And then we have the mock auditions at the end, and we discuss it, and we talk about, everyone turns in their resume so we can talk about what works and what doesn't. And what are we in at this point? Year 8, maybe? Something like that. So it's really great to work with him. I admire him and his playing, and I just admire him so much. It's great to work with him.
Is there a commonality that you see? You can sort of predict that most students who come through this program are going to have issues with X. And is there an X, or is it very, very different depending on the participant?
No, I will say that most people who come in, and I will say this is also true for most people that I hear at a certain age, they really struggle with how to play low. It's really amazing to me, and I don't know if it's not a priority in their brain or if it's not a priority wherever they're studying. They just come in and they have no clue how to do it, and they're just sort of like, oh well, I just have to be able to play Shasti 5, low tutti, and I just have to be passable, and then I'll be fine. And I guess the way I approach my own playing, therefore I demand of my students, is that I don't want anything that I feel like I cannot do in my own playing. So I want to make sure that I'm as well-rounded as I can possibly be. Sure, there are things that I prefer to play or things that I'm a little bit better at playing, but I don't want, ever to have something come up, get put in front of me, and me to say, I can't do that. So I'm always shocked, and Carl and I've talked about it, and we talk about it with the kids, but they're not all kids. But the people campers, thank you, nice, yeah. Next year we should have them wear like little uniforms all the time, knickers or something, and little blue knickers with. So we talk about how it's just like every time we hear the low horn audition, it's like, whoa, what is happening up there? It's a lot of interesting sounds That's the best way to put that. It's the most positive way.
Well, so let's unpack it a little bit. It's a lack of fullness in the sound. It's just sort of flatulated out, and that there's no real sort of tonal center to it, you mean? Or what do you mean?
Flatulated out.
I pay my mortge with those qualities.
With flatulations. Yeah, come on now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just play tuba
To the choir.
Yeah. So nice. So it's more that the sound is too tight in the low register. So it ends up sounding, one of my former students dubbed it the didgeridoo sound. And it's, yeah, there's a lot of that. There's also a lot of scooping into notes. Yeah, and just not a lot of control over either the loud or the soft or both. So it's really interesting. I mean, with the register being so big, it's and all of our main solos are up in the upper register. So it's, unless you really go out of your way to work on the low register, you're going to have issues with it. And it's been my experience that naturally, if you're just like, you give somebody a horn, first off, they're always going to start by working in their upper set. And that's where they're just going to be more comfortable. Only about 10%, and again, my opinion, but 10% of the horn population is naturally comfortable and gifted in the low register. So it's really interesting. Anytime I go somewhere, I always have a lineup after a master class to ask me tons of questions on low register playing, and I probably get asked 2 or 3 times a day, what are my favorite low horn exercises to help people improve their low register. So,
and what are they?
After Lance asks, I can ask, so you can be asked twice today.
Nice. Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're assuming that I haven't already been asked twice today.
Well, yeah. There is that.
Throw my average off. So for me, I think the most important thing is starting off by just really kind of blasting down there, because it's so easy to play incorrectly when you're playing soft. So for me, I really start kids on a sort of a low register blasting exercise. And I know that's not a great sounding word, but it really helps. And after about, maybe 4 months of really playing loud down there, people's low registers start to sort of develop. And the other exercise that I really like to work on is more about a break range exercise, but in case anyone is out there listening who's a horn player, is in the Phil Farkas book, and it's pages 60 and 61, and it's just a nice harmonic sort of work right around the break range, but again, it's playing it loud. So yeah, I think that's the start, is you have to figure out how to sort of break that register in, but it's also about having the proper setup, about bringing your jaw out and a little bit down. And so many people just try to open their jaw, just drop the jaw. And that will change the angle of the air, so that when you're playing in the upper register, the air is a little bit going down, and when you're playing in the low register, it starts to move a little bit up because you're bringing your jaw out so far. And so if you understand that and can angle your air that way, it will help. That's a lot of technical talk.
Well, I mean, it's funny you're talking to 2 low brass knuckleheads, which is redundant, but we're dealing with, the way I always associate it with low brass, it's about pumping gas. It's just about a bunch in and a bunch out, and it's volume, volume, volume. And it sounds like that's the prescription that you're giving, which isn't the norm, I guess. I mean, because you have to get the wind out in order to activate the vibration to get the note. And that's not a thing that comes naturally to horn players, he asks with a question mark at the end of this sentence.
Oh yeah, you'd think it would be, but somehow down there, people, they don't do enough of it. If I were to ask somebody who maybe their low range wasn't so great, if I were to say, okay, tell me how much per day you practice in the low register, either and etude, like the Marty Hackelman, etudes, low etudes are fantastic. I love them. Doing some Bach cello suites, playing Coprage down the octave, whatever. Tell me how much you practice down there on a daily basis. I swear to you, some people say to me, maybe 15 minutes. And I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Hello?
Ain't getting it done.
Yeah. So I said, okay, think about if you had high register issues and you decided to only practice 15 minutes on the high register. And like, well, I would never do that. Okay. So let's work back this scenario here. And, so it's funny. It's like when my students at Peabody, when they go to festivals, summer festivals, a lot of times they're sort of like, wow, you have a really great low register. And so you're going to play low horn. And they're like, actually, I'm pretty decent at high horn too. It's just nobody else is good at low horn. Well, that's an exaggeration. But so they get, put on the people think I'm just teaching low horn. That's not true. I'm just trying to create well-rounded players.
See, my favorite Steve Martin quote is, "I would do anything to get in shape except to eat right and work out."
Hey, yes, that's my motto. I mean, for actually getting in shape, not playing the horn.
There's a book, not to turn this into the other podcast I host, The Entrepreneurial Musician, but which you'd be a great guest for that as well. But
available on Petitnote Media.
Available on Petitnote Media. There's a book called The Blue Ocean Strategy, which is all about hanging out in oceans. A red ocean is a bloody ocean where there's lots of sharks and everybody's kind of competing for the same things. The blue ocean is one where no one's in. It would seem like it's a blue ocean for horn players, that you're the path of least resistance. Not that it's easy to beat you at an audition ever, but it seems like if most people aren't that good at low horn, then you're looking for employment, that maybe you should spend more than 15 minutes a day on low horn playing in order to give yourself the best possible chance at getting employed.
Agreed. And I think that the reason that not as many people are doing it is I think there's still a little bit of a stigma. No, it's more than a little bit. I think there's a fair amount of stigma still attached to being a career low horn player. And one of my sort of overall goals is to try and bring a little bit of respect back to that register, and by creating some new pieces and trying to go out there and perform these pieces and have people hear that, oh, wow, that you could actually play musically in the low register. Then I'm hoping that it will sort of excite some people about the possibility or the opportunity to become a low horn player.
Yeah, that's really great. I went to school with both Jason Snyder, who's fourth horn, of course, in Boston, and with Hunter Scholler, who's fourth horn in Nashville. So you guys are my people. So the fourth horn, there's a lot of stuff that is played in parallel with the tuba as well. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think you're looking to look more impressive in the eyes of tuba players, because we think everyone's impressive, but I think you're talking about horn jocks, which is an uphill battle. So
yeah, wow. I mean, you guys get to play a whole 50 notes in this piece. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's more than 10.
And it still says principal, and
right.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Cool. So speaking of horn jocks, that reminds me of our favorite trumpet jock, Jens Lindemann, who is a dear friend of ours. He's a dear friend of the podcast. He emails us every week, about 3 hours after, and the episodes release at 1 a.m. LA time, and he listens to it when it comes out. But he waits up for it every other week. But he's been going through some chop problems, and you are you're both an artist and a technician, and so I'm wondering if maybe do you think it's a head thing with Jens, or do you think it's a technical thing, or
heart? It could be his heart.
How would you diagnose him? It could be his heart. His heart might not be in it.
Be in it.
Yeah,
I think it's a lack of tequila. I think that the more tequila he could drink, probably the better the chop problems would be. So every time he sort of he feels like, oh man, I'm screwing up, or man, my chops feel super crappy, take a shot of tequila. I'm telling you, it'll cure him right up.
Yeah, I don't like to correct our guests, but I'm not sure if Jens needs to drink any more tequila.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
I picked the right thing. Excellent.
first time he would actually take the advice, I think.
Yes.
This was, gosh, 12 years ago, I played a gig with Jens down in Mexico, did the BAME Sextet with Jens and Jim Thompson, who's the former principal trumpeter of Montreal, and Fred Mills, may he rest in peace, and Marty Hackelman was the horn player, and
Nice.
Julio Briseño was the trombone. He's principal trombone in Mexico City. And somehow I got on that gig. I still don't really understand how. But one night we went to someone's house and they started serving mezcal, which is the cousin of tequila. And somehow Marty had never had that, and somehow I had never had that. And we both took a sip, and then we looked at each other like, "Wait, what?" And then about I think it was about 15 minutes later that Jens actually said, "Hey boys, you might want to pump the brakes. That's really powerful stuff." And we both at one time went and just like waved him off. And then about 45 minutes later, we noticed that the host wasn't there because he had quietly left dinner to go to the store to buy more.
God!
Because we had drank all of it. So yeah, the next morning was not my favorite morning in Mexico. So yeah, it's not a good sign when Jens Lindemann is telling you to pump the brakes on drinking. That's just not good. So, I meant to mention this before we got to the Jens and then the sign off, but you've produced so many videos. My wife is a horn player and a middle school band director. She's obnoxiously good at the horn for someone who gets to play as infrequently as she does because she's doing band all the time. But she is an enormous fan of your videos, of how you do them, of the content, of the teaching, of all of it. And I would highly encourage anyone to listen who's listening. If you haven't seen them, I think the coolest thing about your playing is that it's just music for days, just beautiful phrasing, and it just happens to be in the low register on the horn, which I love. That you're a musician who, it's the old Jacobs phrase, right? Like you're a musician who happens to play the horn. You're just a musician who happens to play the low horn, and it's wonderful. So anyone listening, should really check that out. So.
Well, and as I mentioned, we're going to have. Go ahead.
Oh, I've started to dive into these like 1 minute question answer videos because I get a lot of questions. So I thought, okay, instead of spending hours every day trying to answer people's questions, that I would actually try to do just these little 1 minute videos. And so it's been a really interesting task to be able to get my content into 1 minute. But yeah, it's been pretty fun to do.
So we should try to get our questions into 1 minute.
No, the question, the answer.
We were going to put a link to your website in the show notes. Is that the best way for people to find the videos, or would you rather that they go straight to the YouTube channel?
Well, so I have some videos on YouTube, which is some of my low horn excerpts of the month, that type of stuff. And then I've been putting these question and answer 1 minute things on social media. So on Facebook, my professional page, Instagram, and also on Twitter.
Okay.
But I'm probably going to move them over at some point to YouTube. But then I actually started this online monthly subscription thing for people who want to sort of have a little bit more contact with me, so that we do like these feedbacks and people can send in recordings. I was going to say tapes, recordings of themselves playing, and I'll give feedback, and we do this live Ask Me Anything, and I put out little videos that's just privately for them. And so actually the low horn excerpts of the month from now on is just going to be on that. Because I was actually spending so much freaking money doing it that I wanted.
And so is information on that available at your website?
On my website.
Different site for that? Okay, so
it will be.
People there.
Yeah, okay. It will be. It's in as I mentioned earlier before we started recording, my website is being updated as we speak, so I'm hoping in the next week to two that it'll be up and running. But yeah, all of that information will be there, so people will be able to find that.
Perfect.
Great. And this is actually going to be coming out. You're the next episode that's coming out, but that's going to come out 12 days from now. So it might.
It probably will be updated at that point. So that's great.
Great. There you go. Well, hearing about that site and stuff, unless this is the most awkward 45 minutes of your life, then I would love to have you on the Entrepreneurial Musician. So, and even if it is, I'll still ask. So,
okay, nice.
So anyway, we are going to keep you on the line here to ask you a few more questions for the bonus portion of the interview for our Patreon patrons. But this has been incredible. I love it. It got real serious for a while, and just in terms of talking about mindset and about expectations, and then you even got into some real specifics about technique. And this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Well, it's been our pleasure. At least it's been mine. I can't speak for Lance, but
I'm sorry, I dozed off. What was that?
Yeah, I mean, I was drinking tequila the whole time, so whatever. Me and
you gotta pump the brakes, Denise. Pump the brakes.
Oh, okay, right. Got it.
All right. Well, and that is going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Joey Santillo. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LeDuc. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.